Johnversations podcast number 15. Super excited for my guest today. She has been featured in USA Today, has written pieces for All Horror, 1438 Elm, as well as an author. The Realist Bride, Everything You Really Need to Know About Planning a Wedding, is available on Amazon. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a very warm welcome to Miss Jessica Gomez. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Hi, thanks for having me.
No problem. Thank you for doing it. We were talking a little bit before we started about, how we're holding up, and I was telling you I wanted to save it because it was like a Saturday morning and I opened up Instagram. Like, I'm guilty of that. Like, first thing in the morning I get up and I'm like, let me, scroll through and see what's going on. And I was going through stories and I saw yours, and I believe it was something like, it's just a beautiful day and I was driving through downtown Plymouth and what the fuck? There's all these people, like, no masks, everybody. And for people who don't know, Plymouth in Michigan is very much like almost like something out of Pleasantville. They filmed Scream 4 there. So It's very like little, like very, like if it was a black and white photo, I think you'd be like, oh, this was taken in the 50s. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it looks almost like a beach town with no beach. It's got this little downtown area and there's like a nice park there and it's a really nice area. And yeah, I was not happy with what I saw.
Well, and I think that's what made me laugh so hard is because, like, you're like, I was just driving through downtown Plymouth and I like pictured it in my head because I haven't been home in a while. And then just like what the fuck is wrong with people? And I was like, oh shit. So I take it, you've got a problem, and I feel like you might be like me, but I've had a real problem with people like not social distancing and wearing masks and things like that. It seems like you might be on the same page a little bit.
Yeah, so I haven't seen my family in a few months, outside of my husband and my son. I haven't seen my friends, so I'm taking this very seriously, and I wish that other people would too. And, I feel like it's just going kind of crazy right now with everyone's just chomping at the bit to get everything open. But I think people are just being really short-sighted about it because even if you do open things, the economy is going to take a hit anyway because people are not going to want to be out, especially when there's, a second wave of the virus going around. So I saw what set me off was I was like, I'm going to drive through downtown Plymouth and it's going to be so weird because there's not going to be anyone down there. And then I went and it was packed. And just the thing that really set me off was there was a line at the ice cream place and it was so busy and no one had a mask on. And I was like, ice cream is not fucking essential. Like, I was like, yeah, would I love to have an ice cream cone right now? Yes, I would. But I'm not going to go like put myself or other people at risk to do it.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you, and I was dying in my living room because I was like, yes, like somebody. I felt like in that moment you were kind of like screaming out loud my internal monologue. You know what I mean? Just what I tell myself. So it was not only was it hilarious, but it was very comforting to be like, okay, like somebody else feels like.
That was actually what I was just going to say was I received actually a lot of private messages from that. And it was all people like, I saw that too. I'm so pissed. Like a bunch of people messaged me and had the same sentiment. So it's kind of like you. I felt better about it. Like, okay, everyone that I converse with on Instagram feels the same way as I do. It's not just everybody's just, throwing caution to the wind and no one is following the orders. It's just a select few that are doing it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I feel like we tend to surround ourselves with like-minded people. So,
yeah, for sure.
I know that, I've got friends who are like, yeah, I'm taking it very serious. And I've also got a couple of friends who are like, yeah, I'm not doing the social distancing thing and things like that. But for the most part, like the people that I'm really close to, they all have the same mindset. And I think part of it for me too is harder being in the South. Because in the South, the whole thing has become so politicized that it feels like it's kind of just like a fuck you a little, like I'm not wearing a mask. And so like,
and it's like, it's just so selfish. Like, I'm sorry, it's not more important for you to make a scene than it is for these people who are dying from it. And especially now, you know, I have a 2-year-old, and now there's this evidence that there's this new inflammatory disease that is a result of the coronavirus. So now it's like an extra level of anxiety, because before they thought it wasn't really affecting kids that much.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm like, oh my God, if something happens to my kid, everybody better just watch out.
Yeah, I have an 18-month-old daughter.
Yeah, I know.
So,
yeah, congratulations.
Man. Yeah, well, you know, she's alive, so I guess we're doing okay.
Yeah,
that's the whole bar. You know, she
sometimes
gets
it's hard. They really try sometimes.
Well, every time we go to our pediatrician, he's like, "So, what inventive ways has she figured out to try to kill herself this week?" You know what I mean? So,
sounds like my son.
Oh man, she has no fear. Her big thing now is she likes to climb up on the kitchen table or on the kitchen chairs, and then try to stand up. And I'm like, don't do that, man. Yep. Like, you got a soft head. If you fall, it's not fully formed yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, it's weird. I went to the store today just to get milk because, you know, she gets milk in the morning or cereal or whatever. And I went today and I was like one of maybe 3 people out of like 30 in the store, this little store, who were wearing a mask. And like the dude behind me was like 3 feet away from me, and it was everything I had to just not turn around and be like, dude, back the fuck up. Like, yeah, like there's tape on the floor, man. I like don't need to feel your breath on my neck.
I know. Once this is over, I hope that the 6-foot thing stays, because I'm all about, you don't need to be right next to me. I need a little bit of space in the line. Yeah.
Yeah. It's I don't know, man. It's just, it's so weird. You know what I mean? And part of it for me has been balancing, like feeling like a psychopath, because I'm like, we can't go anywhere. And like they've opened up restaurants here, and they're doing, you know, every other table. And now Governor Bill Lee, who's the governor here in Tennessee, he's actually lifting occupancy limitations and being like, no, you can just bring, you know, if you want to go in, you can do it. And I'm just like screaming at my phone, like, so we have a rule in my house now. I'm not allowed to look at social media 2 hours before I go to bed, because if I do, I don't sleep. I'm just like,
yeah, because you're just wound up about it.
And it's crazy because I don't have anxiety normally, but like, this whole thing has just been like, my mom has never had a drink in her life. Well, she drank, let me rephrase. She drank when she was 21. I think she got hungover and didn't like it and has never drank again. Okay. And since the quarantine started, she went to her doctor, and she was like, I can't sleep. And the doctor was like, you should try drinking wine. So now
just a glass of wine before bed.
Yeah, now she drinks wine every night. We'll like Zoom or FaceTime or whatever. And she's just like, hey, what's going on? Like, she's got a whole extra level of cool now.
That's funny.
I mean, I just feel like it's driving people to places I feel like they never thought they would be, or you know, trying to handle feelings that I think, you know, I never thought I would have. I never thought I'd be like, just nobody come near me. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I have struggled with anxiety for many years. And so I think it's almost kind of like, in some ways, some people maybe could be more empathetic to understand what it's like to be an anxious person. But I don't wish that on anyone. I wish that this didn't happen. I wish that no one was feeling this way. It makes me anxious that more people are anxious. But when it started, well, I knew it was coming because I had been following the news. My husband told me about it when it kind of came out in China, and he was like, this is going to come here. And just so you know, like, it's getting bad and whatever. So I was prepared. We had put together like a little emergency kit, and we did that like a few weeks before the first coronavirus case came to Michigan. So we were okay in that respect. It wasn't like I can't get groceries, like we can't eat. And so that was good. But the first few weeks were rough because, you know, it happened really fast, and then schools were closed for 2 weeks, and then they were closed for the rest of the year. And we were like, oh my God, like, this is insane. I can't believe that this is happening. And, you know, you don't think you're ever going to see something like that in your lifetime. And the anxiety was just getting, you know, higher and higher. And, you know, I get pneumonia and bronchitis a lot. So I was afraid that I was going to get it. And then I was afraid that my son was going to get it. And so, you know, once we were in the house, I was mostly anxious because my husband couldn't work from home at first. So he was still around people at work. So
Mhm.
as soon as he came home and he had been home for a couple of weeks and then there were no symptoms or anything, then I felt much more at ease because we were not seeing anyone. We were not going even to get curbside. We just started doing curbside like a couple weeks ago. We had been cooking every single night. So after a couple weeks went by and like no one had a fever or a cough or anything, then we felt a lot better about it. Like, okay, we're kind of like over that hump where you didn't know who had it. Now we're finding out, which we had always figured, that it came here much earlier
Mhm.
than expected because the testing was basically non-existent at first. So we don't know how many people have had it really, but
Yeah, and the testing is like non-existent now. So I mean, in the grand scheme
yeah,
of
it's
things.
getting better here for sure because Governor Whitmer has been like really making that a priority. She has said from the beginning, like, we cannot control this until we have enough tests. And so we still don't have enough to test everybody, like someone has said, but
Who are you talking
it's
about?
he was here today.
Oh, fun. Yeah, I heard
Yeah.
that he was going like through a Ford GM plant and like
Yeah.
refused to wear a mask even though everyone was like, "Dude, please wear a mask."
Yeah, he's a child.
Well, I honestly think, and I don't know if anybody has said this or if this is a hot take or anything like that. I really think he doesn't wear a mask because he is worried about makeup rubbing off on the mask.
Oh, okay.
I
That makes
wonder
sense.
if he's like going to take it off and then you're just going to see like his real skin tone in the shape of a mask on his face. You know what I mean?
I mean, yeah, I definitely think that probably plays into it. I think he just wants it to be back to normal, and if you want it that way, then you can have it that way, I guess. So
He's just, uh, if there was ever a man to have the level of vanity that gentleman has, you know what I mean? To be like,
and like
just think
like
so
where
highly of
to
himself.
and like why?
Right. Like,
What is it exactly?
I get embarrassed walking around the house, with my shirt off. Like I can't imagine having like that level of narcissism.
Yeah, that's a different kind of personality.
Well, it's we've done like the social distancing. We did a social distancing dinner with my in-laws because they miss seeing the kid, and
Mm-hmm.
they have a big backyard, and they actually have a really big deck. So on the deck there was 3 tables set up. All the food was in the middle, and then each one of our tables were like way more than 6 feet apart. And then
Mm-hmm.
they have a big swing set in the backyard. So we went and we Lysoled down the swing set, and we put Millie in there and let her swing, and then
That's
we
nice.
ate dinner. And and it's my mother-in-law is just like, I just want to hug her so bad. And I'm like, I
I
want you to
know.
hug her so bad, but like,
Yeah.
it's not going to happen, So
Yeah, it kind of makes you think about the things you take for granted. You can't even like touch your family or your friends
I
when
know I just want to
before you
hug
could hug them
people
whenever.
so
Yeah.
bad, and I will say I feel a lot worse for it because obviously my whole family still lives in Michigan. I've been down here for 7 years. So I'm kind of used to like I see you guys on FaceTime. We try to come home
Yeah.
like once or twice a year, but like I'm used to the long distance with them where, with her parents, they, live 5 minutes up the road. They've just
Mm-hmm.
never like had that big distance between them. So it's like an extra level of hard for somebody who's as close as they are, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's just,
It's like so close yet so far away.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I don't know if you saw the people who made like the shower curtain. They like put sleeves on the
Oh
shower
yeah, I
curtain so
did
they
see
could hug each
that.
other.
I know, it's like it's so innovative, but it's so sad.
I know. But, well, I could definitely talk about this stuff the entire time that we're doing the show. But I mean, that's definitely not the reason. I did want to talk to you about that Instagram story because, like I said, it was like I get up with a kid like 8 a.m. on Saturdays, and I was just dying in the living room by myself. But what I wanted to have you on for is, you are a writer, but I think what's very interesting in kind of looking at your work is, a lot of writers, it seems like they kind of focus on, they have like an avenue that they exceed in or something that they focus on. And one
Mm-hmm.
thing that I thought was really interesting about you is that, you kind of dabble in a bunch of different things.
Yeah, I'm all over the place.
Yeah. But I mean, I think that's cool because, people have more than, I think it's easy for people to be pigeonholed into like
People
just
aren't
one thing.
one-dimensional. They have many interests. Yeah.
Right. Like if you were just like the wedding book, you know what I mean? I think people would miss out on the other work that you have to offer. So, like I said, you've been in USA Today. I think
Today Show.
Today Show. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Today
that's
Show.
okay.
They both have the word today in there.
Yes.
I'm sorry. So
very similar.
so, before we get into your work, I did want to kind of ask, when did that passion for writing start for you? Is it something like, because I know for me, I was in bands for a really long time. I liked writing poems. I liked writing like songs, things like that. And that's something that I found I can remember doing like as early as in like second, third grade. So was this something that like you kind of grew into, or is it something that, you feel like was like instinctually built inside you?
I have been writing since elementary school. I've got a couple little books I did that are in like the Erickson Elementary Library still. I think I was always a really big reader, and I think you can't excel at writing if you don't read. So I think that just helped me understand how to construct a story and or an article even. And so it started, I don't know, I was probably 6 or 7. And sometimes I would just write stories at home just for fun, for something to do. And I never finished any of them, but I just, I like doing it. So I would keep at it. And then I remember very vividly in 5th grade, it was the last day of school, and I was walking out of my classroom, and my teacher, Mrs. Jaworski, pulled me aside, and she was like, "Jess, keep writing." And she was the first person that ever said that to me, that like, you have something, so you should keep doing it. And I've always remembered that. And just little things where, the teacher would read my story out loud to the class or something like that. So I knew I had, some semblance of talent for it. And then, I don't know, I guess I never considered like a career as a writer until I was like well into my 20s. I don't know why. I just no one ever talked to me about it. And I went to college and I got my degree in public relations and corporate communication. So there was writing with that, writing press releases and things like that. But as far as like creative writing or article writing, I never thought about it until I was older.
So what was it, because I mean, you go through all those years of school, you get your degree, you're like, okay, I've done it. I've done the work. Where is that switch that says, okay, like, well, you know what? I know I went for this, but now I'm going to like focus my effort into the writing. Was there a moment, or was it just, did you just start doing it, or?
I graduated college in 2008, and that was not a good time to graduate college because the country was not doing very well and there were not very many jobs. And I really didn't realize that a lot of the public relations jobs are not in Michigan. So there already was not that many to choose from. And then you're going into this terrible economy, and it didn't get better for a while. So I just had jobs here and there. And then I did some writing I was a volunteer. I was on the board of an animal rescue, and I would write their newsletter. So I always did like writing in some capacity. And then when I really started thinking about writing the book, I got engaged in 2013, and I had a blog, and in the blog, I would kind of chronicle my mishaps trying to plan my wedding, because I did it myself. And I was kind of like, wait a minute, this is not what people said it was going to be like.
Right.
This is not the happiest time of my life. Sometimes this really sucks, and it makes me upset. And I felt like everything was just harder than I thought it was going to be. And, for whatever reason, so many people just become insane when you're getting married, like family members or friends or whoever it is, people just kind of get weird about it. And then it makes it harder on the bride and groom. So while I was writing this blog, people seemed to really respond to it and they thought it was funny and whatever. So I was talking to my husband about it and I said, I think I want to kind of use that as a jumping off point, and I'm going to write like a wedding planning book. And it's going to be everything you really need to know, not like all the flowery, like, this is going to be the best time in your life. Like, there are parts of it that are awesome, but most of it is really difficult. And so I wanted to, it's basically a how-to from start to finish of how to plan your wedding. And then kind of in between, I share stories about some difficulties that I faced. And, hopefully I think it's funny. I hope other people think it's funny. But basically, there are not really many books like that where, I'm a realist. I think that I see things as they are and not as I want them to be. And so that's kind of what the book is about, is like, this is how it's going to be. It's going to be hard for you. Here's how I'm going to help you through it.
Yeah. And, I was going through and actually reading reviews of the book. It's actually, everywhere I've seen it's like 4 to 4.5 stars out of 5. So I was like, hell yeah. And the and the reviews that I read were saying that exact same thing. We're saying like, it's funny, but it's poignant. Like it offers really good advice, but it does it in a way that, makes it fun to read. And then, in addition to that, like, I think when you can present something difficult as funny, the message still soaks in, but it makes it's like that spoonful of sugar. You know what I mean? It's like, just, it's very real things, but it just makes it a little bit easier to sink in, a little bit easier to be like, oh shit, like this is going to be hard, but at least now I've got that expectation. I really wish. So my wife and I on the 13th, we just celebrated our 4-year wedding anniversary. So, not much you can do right now, but we got like some takeout and hung out. I think we watched like Ghost Nation or something. We're just watching ghost hunting shows.
Hey man, that's some of the best dates.
Yeah. But when I was looking into your book, I was like, man, like this would have been helpful to have, because we were just like, you know what, we're getting married in a park. And then my family flew in from Michigan on a Friday. We got married in the park with just her family and our family. And then we said, screw it, we're just throwing a big party. So that following Saturday, we just ran out of place and had everybody come, and we did like a stock the bar wedding. So we were like, everybody bring a bottle and a bottle to share. So we're like, because we're not, we bought like, I think like a keg or two or something like that. But and I think, looking back at it, I think part of us were like, we just want like low maintenance and, just let people have a party and have fun. But I think if we were to sit down and dissect it a little bit more, we're probably both like, there's so much work to do. Like, let's just not.
It's very overwhelming. And especially, usually it lands on the bride that does most of the planning, just because, in my case, it was fine. I asked for my husband's input and he would give it where I asked for it, but I'm kind of like a controlling kind of personality. And so I want things the way I want them. So I just took it on myself and just kind of designated a couple things just for him to get done. And then everything else was on me. So I never like even thought about hiring a wedding planner, because I was like, I can do it myself. So I really want to, but, there are parts that are fun, but it's mostly not. So
yeah, we didn't have any kind of planner or anything. My wife, we have a friend, her name is Ashley, and she listens to the show. So I'm hoping that she hears this, but she is someone with like that, like whether you hire her to do it or not, like she's like, I'm your friend. I'm going to make sure that this is exactly what you want. So like the night before that, like 2 nights before everybody got there, like she had come over and dropped off boxes. So it was me and my friend Hayden. We're just sitting doing, all these, doing like 500 little poof balls, just unfolding them. Just you think you're getting close to done, and there's a whole nother box. And then my friend Mark from Michigan came down for the wedding and had never met her, but she was like, get this, move that over there. Cause he was there, early with us. And he was like, I don't know who this lady is, but she's just having me do all, and I mean, so thankful for her because like she helped with all the decorations and stuff like that. And just did it out of the kindness of her heart. But, it was just like, I couldn't imagine like having to sit down and like plan everything out. Cause I just wanted it to be where, everybody came and just had a good time. It wasn't like, I feel like sometimes like I've been to like a Catholic wedding before and it's just like so long.
It's very long. Yes.
So it's like, I just, we had food, we had drinks and things like that. But I think that's what was the daunting thing to us was just like, we don't even know where to start if we were going to sit down and try to do this like the way that everybody else does it, Well, I want to ask, so, the book comes out and like, what kind of feedback are you getting on it? Like, is it, I mean, do you like, was it, again, I've seen the reviews and things like that, but like, what was that feeling like when it came out and you're like, this is my, like, okay, like, holy shit, I've written a book, like, and it's out there now. Like, what's that feeling?
So I self-published this book. I'm writing a fiction novel right now, which I'm not going to self-publish. I'm going to query agents for that one. But for this one, I had no patience. As soon as I was done, I wanted it out there. So I self-published on Amazon, and I first released it just as an ebook. And then a few months later, I offered it in paperback. And it is, I can't describe the feeling when people are buying something that you made and then you're just hoping that they like it. And, in a way that's like, when people read something that you've wrote, that's something that's a part of you and it's personal. And so it can be really jarring if someone doesn't like what you're writing or, they have things to say about it. It's always like, as I said, I'm like an anxious person anyway. So when it first came out, I was like, this feels really weird. Like, I don't know if I like want people to read this or whatever. Right. So
like, well, it's a little late now.
Yeah. Right. But, thankfully the reception has been really positive. I was featured on brides.com 2 years in a row for one of the best wedding planners. So that was very exciting for me. I don't know how they chose me. They didn't contact me. I literally just saw an uptick in my book sales and was like, what happened?
What's going on?
Yeah. And so I just was like Googling around and I'm like, oh shit, I made this list. So that was awesome. But, yeah, the feeling is really strange that strangers are reading something about your life, because I do talk about my wedding and, my experiences in the book just for a reference point. And it's weird that people I've never met, never will meet, are reading something I wrote. And, like I said, hopefully they like it and get something from it. It's gotten a little easier now because I write regularly, as you said, for allhorror.com. I write for them at least once a week. So I'm used to it now where people are reading something that I've written, but still the book is still the most personal just because it's a book. It's not the same as writing an article. It's much more personal. You've put, months and months into it, and people read it. Well, have things to say about it.
Yeah,
so.
Well, and it's funny that it's, in a way, it is comforting to hear you say that, because I can relate to, like, I had all the equipment to do this podcast, the name for the podcast. I had the website bought and designed a year before I actually put anything out, because I was like, nobody's going to want to listen to this. Like, it's a really good idea to me, but it's just
you get in your own way.
Yeah. And it's like, now, we have people that listen to the show that, are in the Philippines, are in India, in the UK.
That's awesome.
So it's, I feel like I'm the kind of person that if I put out a book, I would be looking at like, okay, like, this is how many are sold, but how many were returned? Like, how many people were like, I don't like this, like, said, because I don't know.
Oh my God, I never even thought about that.
I'm sure Amazon doesn't tell you that. I'm sure they're not. Like,
yeah, no, they don't.
Sending your shit.
If people
back,
are returning it, I don't know, but whatever.
Well, now, like, that's, it's got to take such a strong will to kind of allow yourself to be vulnerable, especially when you're writing about yourself. And, I know, a lot of the writing that you've done too, has been about being a mom, right?
Mm-hmm.
So do you feel like, talk to me a little about that, because I know as a parent, like for me, even on the show for a long time, I just said, oh, the kid, and just recently I've like
Mm-hmm.
caught myself being like, oh, Millie, my daughter, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I know sometimes for me, it's you want to walk that balance of being like, oh, well, I think this is a story or something that people might think is funny or get some value out of, but I also don't want to be like, here's everything about like my kid and my personal
Yeah.
life and stuff like that. So have you found a balance, or is there a way that you're able to kind of reconcile the two?
Well, I don't post any photos on any social media of my son. I've never posted a photo of him. My parents and in-laws are forbidden to post photos of him just because that's just a decision that my husband and I made. My husband's a lot more private than I am, but we both agreed on protecting our son's privacy because he doesn't have a say in the matter. And I don't trust these people who own these social media sites. As soon as you post a photo, it belongs to them. I don't know what they're doing with the pictures.
Right.
So I will, as far as I can tell for now, I'm not planning to post photos of my son on any of the articles that I write. Or, we were talking about the Today Show article.
Not USA Today, the
Yeah.
Today Show. Because I'm a fucking idiot.
It's okay. It's no big deal. So I wrote an article about my son. It was his first Christmas, and I didn't use our pictures for that or anything. Most people do, but I just use like a stock photo. But anyway, that article, I guess you would say it went viral, if you even want to call it that. Basically, I wrote on the Today Show like parenting blog, which anybody can write anything there if you join, but they chose my article to share on all of their social media platforms. And so all of a sudden it's got like, hundreds of thousands of reads on it. And most of the people had the same sentiment as me. Basically, the article was about how his first Christmas, we were trying to appease so many people and trying to go so many places that we ended up not pleasing anyone, and especially not ourselves. And my son was so like overstimulated that he was crying the entire night, like hysterically. So it just was not a good experience. And so I just was talking about how for the next year I was going to be setting some boundaries, and we're only going like one place per day. And most of the people who were young mothers such as myself were like, this is totally right, like this is what we're doing. And then you've got a couple of people from an older generation who are like, you're so selfish and it's not about you and whatever. So I mean, one lady wrote me like a hate email. She like found my website and like filled out the contact information.
Just took the time.
Yeah, like I was reading her email and I was like, oh my God, this lady literally like took the time and found me. And I was reading it and I was just like, honestly, she's just working out her own issues. So I just never responded or anything, but
you should have just been like, okay, boomer.
Yeah, so that kind of stuff, I'm definitely getting better about brushing those kind of things off and like realizing that when people have negative things to say, it's more about them than it is about you and their own personal issues that they're going through. And even though they are nasty and shouldn't act like that, it's not really going to help anything to, try and get into it with them. So
now, was this like a nasty like email, or was it just like, I disagree with you?
It was in between.
Okay.
It was like, I'm sorry, I don't have time to write or whatever you do. And I was like, you're literally writing
I
me an
don't know
email right
words.
now. And I was like, okay, I said that's like my job, but whatever. And then she was just talking about how I'm selfish, and that was pretty much it. But
Yeah, well, I mean, and I don't know, maybe I'm selfish too, but with, Millie's, Millie's first Christmas, her first Christmas, she was really too little to, she was really too little to have anything like really sink in, because she was born in October, and
oh,
then,
okay.
So and every year normally we just go to her mom's, and her mom, like the whole family comes there, so she's right down the road. But this last Christmas, something happened where Christmas was actually at our house, and that made it a lot easier, because then instead of like having to be like, all right, load her, everybody just came to our house. And then when we were done, we are like, okay, you guys can go now. Like, see ya.
Yeah.
Great having you, but now it's time for you to leave. But she was very much the same way. Like if we would go to like a family function or there was a lot of people around, she would get like so overstimulated that she would become overtired, or like it just seemed like being around like a big group of people and everybody being like, let me hold her, let me hold her.
Yeah, it's too stressful.
Yeah, and you come home, it's like her little brain's all rewired because she's, and for us, it was also like we didn't want to be helicopter parents where it was like, no, only we can hold her, but for us, I think it was trying to figure that out, to be like, okay, how do we make sure that she's comfortable around other people, but also, make sure that she's not just going crazy when we get her home. So I think unless you're a parent, I think it's, things I never would have thought of. I never would have been like, I have to worry about, her spending time in these big groups, because, and you really have to like know your kid to be able to watch them and like kind of like see those signals. I don't know if your son does that, but Millie is very much like, you can tell like when she's had
yeah, you know them the best because you're their parent. So what works for them is what you should do. And if you're going contrary to that, then you have to expect either a meltdown or there's going to be some kind of an issue later for you. So it's better to just keep them happy. And, like I said, I try and see everybody. It's just not all going to be on Christmas Day anymore.
Right.
So, and then it worked out great because now we only go one place per day. And guess what? It seems like everybody's happier because we're not like, okay, we got to get to the next place, like
right.
1 foot out the door type thing. So yeah, it's better for everybody.
Yeah. And my brother was like that too, where it was like, he would see us and then he'd have to go see his wife's family when I was in Michigan. And it's just like, you're not giving either group like the time that they really want. So I think that's a good way to break it up. Let me ask you this, because one thing for me, when you like, do you ever get a sense, so if you get like an email like that, or like, because I get a sense from you, you're probably someone who tries to stay out of like, if you post something, you may try to stay out of like the comments, or maybe I'm wrong about that, but like for me, I'm very much like, if I put something out, I just am like, it's out. I don't want to hear. I don't need to see what people are thinking. It's already out, whatever. But then there's also a part of me that's like, if I'm getting like a strongly worded email or like a negative comment, it makes me feel like I'm kind of, I feel like I'm doing something right because I'm reaching enough people that somebody's finally like,
you're striking a nerve
like
in some way.
Right.
No, I read all the comments.
Do you?
Yeah. I shouldn't. It's like, every person that has any kind of success says don't do that to yourself, because as long as you are happy with what you've written, that should be all that matters. Or, whoever you're writing it for is happy with you, then that's all that matters. So obviously you want to make sure that you're being understood the correct way. Because there were a couple people who, for that particular article, a couple people were kind of taking what I said in a way that I didn't mean it. And I did like reply a couple times. It's like, there's no
like,
point.
I'm going to set you straight.
Yeah. Not even that way. Cause maybe like 5 years ago I would have done that, but now I'm more just kind of trying to come at it where I'm trying to explain it. Nobody cares. So It's fine. Just
Well,
think what you want.
Well, and that's the hard thing for me, because I feel like there's people out there that no matter if you're like, no, like, I understand why you would think that, but I'm actually coming from it this way. They're going to be like, whatever, they just want to have something negative to say. Cause I can imagine, this show is not anything where there's like, thousands and thousands of comments or anything on every episode. But I can imagine if you're somebody who has a big platform, it could be like, if you were to sit down and go through all those comments, it could be like an emotional roller coaster. Like, this person loves it, I'm terrible. And
yeah. And, with the book I'm writing right now, I'm hopefully going to go the traditional publisher route, and then hopefully I'll be in stores and things like that. And that's like way ahead. I'm not even done with the book yet, but if that does happen, then I'm just going to have to get a thicker skin and just learn to turn it off, because if you do get to that point, there's going to be a lot of people with a lot of opinions about what you write or whatever you're doing. So it just kind of comes with the territory for anything, just like with this podcast, how you were saying, like, the more people who listen, the more there's going to be more comments about it. So you just have to turn it off at some point.
Yeah. I'm just hoping we get to a place where we get a lot of negative comments, because then I'm like, all right, we're doing something.
Yeah.
And, the other thing too is, like, I feel like people only do that kind of stuff. Like, those people would only leave you comments on like the Today Show or on, social media. They wouldn't come to like your book signing and be like, this is what I think about that.
Yeah. Everybody's very emboldened online. That's my husband and I talk about that all the time, where, now everyone has an opinion. So for better or for worse, probably for worse in a lot of situations. But
I've done customer service over the phone, and that's a lot of the same. Like, oh, like, you have a lot of things to say to me over the phone.
Yeah.
That you would probably never say to, or maybe you would. Maybe you're just that kind of person. But
yeah, if
I'd like to think that you wouldn't.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you this. So how do you, like? Because again, you write a lot of horror related articles. You're writing, once a week, and that. Have you always been a fan of horror films? Because I'm a scary movie geek. My wife hates it.
Are you?
Oh yeah.
Oh, that's exciting. What's your favorite scary movie?
It's hard for me to pick one. Since you said, what's your favorite scary movie? I definitely think Scream is one of my all-time favorites, just because, number one, I think it captured, I remember being in middle school going and seeing that, when like it was very rare for people to have cell phones, and like video stores were still the same thing. And then it was just so into like making fun of itself and the genre.
Very meta. Yes.
But it was still a scary film. Like, I remember leaving the
it was funny and scary. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love Matthew Lillard, and even
God,
those Scooby-Doo movies, but I love him in everything that he's done. I really like Skeet Ulrich, who played Billy in the first one. And then I get a lot of hate, but I think even the sequels are, not all of them, and definitely not the same level. But I enjoyed Scream 2. Scream 3 I thought was super weak sauce, and I think 4, maybe it was because they filmed it at home, but it was I was partial to that. I'm a huge fan of the original Halloween, John Carpenter's Halloween, Evil Dead, Last House on the Left, the original, and I thought the remake was really good. I worked at Blockbuster when I was in high school, and I rented Last House on the Left and had no idea what it was, and I brought it home.
Oh my God.
Put it in the VCR, and I got like 20 minute into it, and I was like, nope. And I had like
I can't watch that movie. Yeah. I saw that once, and I was like, I'm never watching this again. It was too much.
The remake, I like the remake because I feel like it stayed true to the source material without being like as over like, this is 70s exploitation. We got to be like super, super over the top and show everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's just so many of them. I really like the Rob Zombie remake of Halloween. The second one kind of threw me off a little bit, but like I thought that first one was a really interesting way to kind of get that backstory and things like that. So my wife hates it because I'm always like, I want to go see this. Like, can we go see this? And she's like, I don't want to go.
She's not into it.
No, not at all. What about you? So, being someone who, if this is something that like you've got a fandom for, I mean, was there anything that kind of sucked you in to the genre? Do you have any favorites or anything that stick out for you?
Well, the first horror movie I ever saw, I think I was 4, and it was the TV miniseries based on Stephen King's novel. So obviously I should not have been watching that when I was 4.
I watched it when it was on TV.
Yep. So I think that was my first one. And I just remember I have a very vivid memory. I was sitting eating pizza and I was just like barely eating. I was just mesmerized by this movie. And I understood it was, a scary movie. And I thought it was scary, but I wasn't like, it's not like I had nightmares and like freaked out or anything about it. But from there, basically my parents let me watch a bunch of stuff that I probably shouldn't have watched. I don't know if I watched the whole thing, but I must have seen at least part of A Nightmare on Elm Street because my cake when I was 5 had Freddy Krueger on it.
Oh my God.
My grandma made my cake and she was like, what do you want on it? I said Freddy Krueger. And she was like, who is that?
I'm kind of wondering if we're siblings and just don't know it because I swear to God, my dad showed me that movie when I was probably 4 or 5, and there's a picture of me that my mom has in Michigan. It's a Polaroid picture. Blockbuster had built like this furnace set, and then they had a guy that came in the full Freddy Krueger makeup and glove, and you could go and like get your picture taken with him. I don't think it was Robert Englund. I doubt Robert Englund was like, I'm going to go to 37 different Blockbusters. Yeah. But there's a picture of me, and I'm like 5 years old, and he's got his arm wrapped around me in the glove, and I just got this smile on my face.
That's awesome.
Beaming from ear to ear. Yeah, and oh my God. Like I saw the remake, and I was a little disappointed, at least in the second one, but I have a very similar memory. We just moved into our house in Canton, and we ordered like Little Caesars, and I was just sitting there. And I think for me, I don't know if it's the same for you, but I think that movie hit so hard because it's not like super gory. It's not super like the original, but it was about little kids and like something that was like eating children. So I think I was like, oh my God. So let me ask you this. Because for me, I think I liked them so young because I was very curious about like feeling scared and like kind of like, oh, I like this. Like, I don't know why I like it, but like I'm into like being a little freaked out. Did you have anything similar at that age, or was there something at that age that made those kind of stick out over other things?
I think it was just because my mom liked horror movies and that she was kind of like letting me into this little club. I knew I was not supposed to be watching these movies. I knew they were meant for a much older audience. And she would explain things to me. So she explained like about Freddy Krueger, how he would get you in your dreams. She explained, I remember when the first time.
Such a good thing to tell a little kid. So listen.
Yeah, I know.
Don't go to sleep.
Just a heads up.
Right.
So I watched Halloween, the 1978, the John Carpenter one, and she explained the backstory to me before I watched it. And in fact, she told me, which you don't find out until actually Halloween 2, but that Jamie Lee Curtis's character, Laurie Strode, is actually the sister of Michael Myers. So I knew that going into the movie. So I thought that was kind of like an interesting thing. And I didn't even really realize until I was like a teenager. I was like, wait a minute, they don't even talk about it at all in the first one. But anyway, she gave me the backstory of like who Michael Myers was. And she told me about her experience because she had seen it when it came out in the theater, and it really freaked her out because she was young when it came out. So, you know, she's like, we have to have the right experience, turned all the lights off and, you know, let me have like a full viewing experience of it. So I think it was just because she was really into them and was letting me watch them. And I always liked them. I never was like, I don't really like this or whatever. There are certain kinds of horror movies that just really are my jam. But as far as like the big ones like that, I've always loved them since I was young.
Yeah, I'm not like one of like the big like gore guys. Like,
yeah, I'm not either.
Like, you know, I saw the first Saw, but then the rest of them after that, I was like, nah, I get what this is. It's just like,
yeah.
But I think for me, something that because my dad was the same way. My mom, it was always like, oh, like, have you seen Rocky Horror Picture Show? Like, we used to go to the theater and they played in the theater and you'd yell at the screen and people would dress up. But my dad was always into, you know, like, okay, like you got to watch this. And still to this day, he's like, oh, it's got this guy in it, this dude directed it. Like, you know, I think that's where I get that from. But for me, I think it was always like, can I figure it out? You know what I mean? Like, can I, like, when I'm watching it, do I know when the scare is going to come? Because, you know, like, I like that too. I'm like, okay, they want you to be scared here. That means you're not going to get the scare, but then the scare is going to be like a minute later when you're, I like standing in the theater and being like, okay, like, we got this. And
yeah, I know what's coming.
Yeah. We went and saw, so let me ask you, because you mentioned Jamie Lee Curtis being Michael Myers' sister. What did you think about the 2018 Halloween, the one that
I haven't seen it?
Oh my God.
I know.
We went, Kara was 9 months pregnant. I was like,
oh my God.
I was like, we're going. And she was like, I don't want to see it, but I'll see it for you. I was like, the only thing that would make this movie scarier is if your water broke.
I know I want to see it. It's just like I watch so many horror movies for my job that I don't always like get to the theater because I'm just watching them at home.
Yeah.
And that was one that I wanted to see, and then I just never ended up doing it, which I will watch it, but
yeah, I think it's on. Well, I mean, I'm sure you know, but they essentially go back and just act like every movie after the first one didn't happen.
I did read that. So they're not siblings?
No. And they like reference it. They're like, that's just some crazy rumor that the town made up.
Oh,
blah, blah,
okay.
Blah. So they call it out. But yeah, it's I mean, especially somebody who's followed the franchise and been like, oh, okay, so like this happened and then this happened. And then you get like Halloween 3 with the mask. And then he's, you know, in some kind of like Celtic cult and like Halloween 5.
I can't with Halloween 3. I can't.
No, it's so bad. And I have friends who love it. They're like,
oh
it's
my
so
God.
good.
I can't I can't understand the people who like that movie. No.
It's so bad.
That's a no.
I'm going to refill my drink real quick while you're taking a sip. I didn't want to do it while you're talking and be rude. Okay, cool. I just spilled that everywhere. I'm a mess of a human being. So, you know, being someone who has kind of had that like affinity for those films and grown up in that, and again, that's something I can definitely relate to. When, like, did you actively like search out the like, hey, I want to write reviews, or I mean, did you just kind of like stumble into it? I mean, how did you go from? I guess what's interesting to me is, you know, you start off with a book that's all about like, hey, everything that people don't tell you about planning a wedding, and like you recently just did an interview with with the lead actress from Sleepaway Camp, which is one of the weirdest and like craziest out there horror films like ever. So I mean, how did that transition happen?
I started my own website called the Nightmare Network. I haven't written on it in a really long time. It's still up, but so I just started my own website just for fun, and I just started writing reviews on there. And I started kind of making some industry contacts that way, and a couple of publicists would reach out to me and ask me to review their films, for like smaller, like indie films. And then I did a few interviews through there, but again, it's just kind of like smaller films, directors or lead actors or things like that. So then I was like, I really love writing about it so much. I'd love to write for a site like as a job. So I reached out, literally I just Facebook messaged allhorror.com and I was like, hey, I write these articles. Here's some samples, are you looking for writers? And he said that he was. And that was it. Like I really struggled with that one, that I just randomly reached out to this site, and not only were they looking and hired me to freelance doing these articles, but I have a really great relationship with the founder of the website, and he's really supportive of all the different kind of articles that I want to write. So it's been a really nice creative outlet. He's let me do some really interesting articles there. I review movies and I do interviews, but I just, for Mother's Day, I wrote an article called The Psychology.
Yes, the screen grab at the top of that article is mind-blowing.
I did not choose that picture.
Was that from
the horror of motherhood, the psychology behind how mothers watch horror films. So it's just basically about how there's basically a chemical change in the brain when a woman becomes pregnant. And for a lot of mothers, that leads to heightened empathy. And when I first had my son, I really didn't want to watch horror movies. And it was just something that over time got better. And thankfully it did, because I didn't want to like not only not be able to write about them, but I just really love them and I didn't want to lose that. But basically now I cannot watch anything with kids. If there's any kind of like a child is in danger, I cannot watch it. I never had that before. I have my son. I don't know if I was like cold or something. It always affected me, but not like this. Like it's very like traumatic for me to try and watch something like that. So I wanted to explore that for the site. And I kind of talk about how a lot of these movies about parenthood are really, most of them are done by men. And so the perspective is skewed because it's their perspective on what is scary about being a parent. And for a mother, a lot of times that looks very different. So, that's just one recent article that I wrote. But
well, what I'm hearing you say is that I'm a terrible husband for making my wife go see Halloween when she was 9 months pregnant. So as soon as we're done, I'm going to apologize to her for that.
I can't believe she saw that with you. That's crazy.
Oh, she loves me. And that's the thing too. That's how I know, like when she's trying to do something nice for me, she's like, well, we could go, it's playing if you want to go see that. I'm like, I know you don't want to go see it, but I appreciate you.
Yeah, that's cool that she does that if she's not really into it, because I know
always
people can't watch them at all.
I end up going with her mother-in-law, because her mother-in-law, or my mother-in-law, not her. If I went with her mother-in-law, I'd be going with my mom. Yeah. No, I go with my mother-in-law because she loves them. Okay. She's the worst person to sit next to in the theater though, because when she gets scared, she hits. So she'll be like this, and then like she'll jump and then just like whack you in the arm. So I've made a rule that like we have to have a seat between us because I don't want to get assaulted when I go.
That's funny.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing, honestly, that I did want to ask you about, because I'm very much like I'm a true crime guy too. So I can watch and I until I had my daughter, well, my wife had her, I was there, but before she was born, I really didn't like nothing, if it was with kids or anything like that, I was like, oh, like it doesn't faze me. And Netflix just put out a docuseries called The Innocence Files, which is about the Innocence Project. And they work to, if someone was convicted and it's overturned with like DNA, they work to, essentially reopen the case, have it retried. And the first 2 episodes were I'm not going to go into the details. Like you just told me how sensitive you were. So I'm not going to be like, hey, you want to hear something? But like, I got into bed and I was like, I would fucking murder someone. Like
Yeah.
if anybody ever hurts my, like, it hits me in a way that like it never hit me before. And I was like, I get to that spot where I'm like, why am I even watching this? Cause it's just making me like put
Yeah, it's
myself
upsetting you. Yeah.
in those shoes. But the thing that really stuck out to me, and one thing I did want to ask you about is, especially with horror, and you may have thoughts on this, you may not, but it definitely seems to be, as far as like the writing, even a lot of like, the reviews, the media cover, it seems to be like a very male based genre of film. So, I mean, with being so involved in it, like, I guess what I'm asking is like, what is it like to be a woman in that world? You know what I mean? Because, all the horror films are always like, naked, they're having sex and there's boobs everywhere. And then the slutty chick gets killed. You know what I mean? It's never like some dude running from a female serial killer with his, wiener out. Cause it's like, there's no, it's always like very,
it's different.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, what is it? I mean, have you noticed any challenges or like any differences, or is I don't know. I guess I was just curious as to how that's worked for you.
I mean, there have been a couple movies that people have sent me that they want me to review, and I don't even open it because I'm like, I can tell already what this is, and it's not. It's just basically an exploitation film. So there are so many subgenres under horror, and there's nudity in a lot of horror movies, but the ones that get really crazy with it are usually like more towards exploitation. So, these like really crazy, like they're almost like a softcore porn type movies. Like, I don't really care for those kind of movies anyway. So that doesn't really affect me in that way. And like, I don't care about nudity and if there's sex in it or whatever. It's like, I feel like horror kind of gets like the brunt of that when there are so many films that have nudity and have like sex in them. They're just displaying it in a different way. So, I mean, I have a new column that I'm doing once a month, and it's specifically on teen horror, and it's called Fuck, Scare, Kill, the Autopsy of Teen Horror. And then I
that's an awesome
dissect name. Thanks. It took me a while to come up with it. But basically I'm just dissecting what makes a teen horror, like what kind of impact does it have on culture? What kind of impact does it have on other horror movies? What influences did it draw from? And I chose Fuck, Scare, Kill because it's always teenagers having sex. There's always like a fake scare. They're trying to scare each other. And then it's either like kill or be killed. And there's this like formula, but it works because that's what people will go and see. And it's also gotten a lot better. Like in the 80s, it was definitely a lot more of the gratuitous nudity and things like that. It's not really like that as much anymore. Especially now, there's a lot more women directing and writing horror movies now than there ever have been. It's still a minority by far, but we're starting to see more stories from women that are gonna look different.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I definitely think you're right as far as that's something that's always kind of bummed me out about the horror genre in general, is that it seems to not be taken as seriously as like other genres of film,
Never.
and I mean, I think there's some films that would, fall under that and not be like, the Friday the 13th franchise. I mean, it's not my favorite, but it's one of those where like, they're very open about being like, this was super cheap. We were just having fun. We wanted to show boobs. You know what I mean? Like,
yep.
so, like I get it to that aspect, but then you have, I mean, they're like, I don't know if you've seen Creep. Have you seen Creep on, it's on Netflix, and Creep
Yeah,
2.
I loved it.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
so good. And it's like, it's a, it's like a found footage film, but it doesn't feel like it feels more of like a documentary than like just somebody running around with a camera.
Yeah, it's not like the camera's super shaky or anything like that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not like the Blair Witch, you're just in the woods. And
Mm-hmm.
that was another one my dad took me to. I must have been like 9. He was like, "You want to go see the Blair Witch?" I was like, "Sure." So, but I think where like I have my problem is, there's horror films out there like I Spit on Your Grave, where it's like, okay, this woman has to get raped, and then once she's raped,
Mm-hmm.
now she's like super strong, and she's gonna wear like,
Yeah.
why can't she just be strong from the
Right.
beginning? Why does something
Yeah.
terrible have to happen first? And so like that's kind of the stuff that I can't do. Like I can't,
Yeah.
if it's
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't watch any of those like rape revenge movies. I don't get it. It's not. I can see how some people would think that that would be like empowering or maybe like helpful in some way, but I
yeah.
also don't think that like a rape survivor would want to watch a movie like that, I guess, but I don't know. It's definitely not a genre that I even like go into at all, just because I don't I don't subscribe to that theory where, something, how you said, like something bad happens to you in that way that's like super traumatic. Which I guess, I mean, in a lot of horror movies, something traumatic happens and then they kind of like rise up from that. But I don't know. I don't think it needs to get as graphic as that. So,
Yeah, but I mean, like for me, like I think about like, so like Scream, for example, with Nev Campbell, like even though she's not like a fighting badass in the beginning of the movie, right? She's still very
mhm,
much like, I don't want to have sex with you. You know what I
yeah.
mean? Like she's got those, but she's okay being like this, and then as the movie progresses, she has to have that same kind of, she has to have like that same kind of strength, but in a like a more physical, like combative way,
Hmm.
where I feel like a lot of those movies are just like, oh, I'm just happy go lucky. And then something terrible, like it's an excuse to show something terrible and then be like,
Hmm.
now I'm, now they're going to pay, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where it's, I think very much to what you said, I think it can be like an acceptable reason with finger quotes to be, to exploit that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And my wife's the same way. Like if there's some, like if we go see a movie and there's some kind of like sexual violence, she's like,
Hmm.
okay, bye. She'll get
Yeah.
up and just leave the movie theater. And like,
Yeah. Like no one wants to watch that.
yeah,
It's
especially
not,
not in like a group. That's not something I want to be like,
yeah, that's,
all
yeah.
300 people of you, like let's
Yeah. It's
watch
weird.
this
Yeah.
terrible thing together. Um, I did want to ask, because you had mentioned it seems like, and definitely not to get off on like like women power and everything like that, but it is something that's always it's something that I've tried to do with the shows, that I've wanted to be inclusive of different voices and things like that. I didn't want it just to be like a bunch of people who sound, because I'm boring. I'm just sitting in a room. I'm sitting in a room talking to interesting people. That's like my whole thing. But you said there's a lot more female directors and screenwriters and script. Like, what's come out recently that has been a sign for you that like, or like what stands out to you as like a new voice or something that's being different in that way?
Roxane Benjamin is a new-ish director to horror, and she is writing characters who are more realistic. So they're not like glamorous in any way. They are problematic in the choices they make, and they're not always doing the right thing or being smart about safety or things like that, where she's able to write these characters who, even though they're making mistakes, you're still rooting for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think she is smarter about writing like a more realistic woman, where it's not someone who is always doing the right thing or always makes the right choice or whatever it is. um So that kind of is like a signal to me that things may start to get a little bit more realistic, because a lot of characters are not maybe as flawed as people are.
Mm-hmm.
So, or you don't even get into the inner workings of things like that. So now we're getting these characters who it's like, I can relate to that in a more real way, you know?
Yeah. Um, I definitely agree. I think it's because we tend, and you kind of touched on this, you know, when you were talking about your segment, you said it was fuck, scare, kill, right? So,
Yeah.
but you know, there's like tropes, like that
Mm-hmm.
just seem to like be repeated and they continue to work. But for me, like I think, you know, going back to like both the like the miniseries and even the remake, one thing that I think really stuck with me about that is the fact that like they go into those characters, you know what I mean? They give them depth, like they show,
Mm-hmm.
you know, how what happened to them as children affects them as adults. And it's, you know,
Mm-hmm.
as much of a character study of a group of people as it is, you
Yeah.
know, we just want to scare you. Have you seen The Outsider on HBO?
I didn't finish it. I think I saw most of the episodes.
Yeah. That when I watched that, it took me back to kind of that same feeling where, you know, Ben Mendelsohn is just like a genius in anything. The guy who plays the detective,
Yeah,
he's just a genius in anything that he does. But like
absolutely.
just watching him kind of be like, I know this is the guy, and then he's got to go through his own, you know, it's just like,
Mm-hmm.
and I think, I mean, maybe that's, you know, maybe that's really highlighted well in like Stephen King's writing, maybe
Mm-hmm.
outside of all the books that he did when he was on coke. But
I'm reading. My friend bought me a book that Stephen King wrote called On Writing, and it's about like his career as a writer, and it's like giving like writing tips. And he's like talking about like, I don't even remember writing Cujo. Like
yeah.
it's like a mess.
It's like I was in a dark room. Dude, he
Yeah.
was going through like 2 bags of coke a day. Like,
Yeah. He said that he didn't even realize that The Shining was about him until like years later.
yeah, and that's one of those movies too, The Shining, that I'm torn on it because I really enjoy the film, and they do something here in Tennessee where there's they're like a farm to table restaurant, but then every Halloween, they have a barn out back that they convert into, you know, they put tables out there and people can sit, and then on the barn wall, they'll do like The Shining and Hocus Pocus, and they'll do
Oh,
all these
okay.
Halloween. So you can, it's like dinner and a movie, which they probably won't be doing this year.
Right.
But you know, they did The Shining, so I saw it. I watched it recently, but it's one of those films that like I really enjoy watching, and then you hear Stephen King be like, I fucking hated it. It's
Yeah.
like it's so
He
bad. You
doesn't
know what
like
I mean?
the Kubrick
Yeah.
interpretation.
Um, yeah, it's just I don't know, man. Like I think there's just something if you can, and that's another one of those films too, where it's like you like really get sucked into, because Jack Nicholson in that film seems a little off from the very beginning, you
Yeah.
know, but then you just watch him kind of like
Just slowly descend into
just
madness. Yeah.
devolve.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen on YouTube? You can find like they were doing like behind the scenes footage, and it's before he does the axe scene, and he's getting all like hyped up and he's jumping, he's like slapping himself in the face, like trying to
No,
make himself
I
feel
haven't seen
yeah.
that. I'm gonna
Yeah,
look
and
that
they're
up.
like action, he's like just goes crazy. You know what I mean? But you get to kind of like see like, oh, that's what you have to do to put yourself, it's not like you
Yeah.
just like, oh, let me put my coffee down and
Uh-huh.
go nuts. um so I did want to ask, and not to kind of backtrack a little bit, but you know, you mentioned, and I'm really excited for this article now because I'd like, you're right. There seems to be certain things, and I think you see it in like the Friday the 13th, the Nightmare on Elm Street, the like how there's certain like tropes and like this is your final girl and things like that that just kind of, I mean, you can go through what, like the last 40 years, you know, 40
Yeah.
50 years, and they're all like very very similar. What do you think, as somebody who spends probably more time watching, you know, these kind of films than, you know, your average person,
Hmm.
like what do you think it is about those tropes that like keep bringing people back in, or that they're able to keep recreating them?
I mean, I think everyone likes to see an underdog, and usually I guess women are the underdog for whatever reason that, you know, people see women as the underdog, that, you know, they're kind of weak in some way in the beginning and then they rise to the occasion. So, you know, this final girl thing, basically if you see a group of people, you pretty much know that there's going to be like one single girl who's probably going to be the one who makes it at the end. So I think that people like to see overcoming adversity, for the younger crowd, and for, you know, some people just in general. The nudity part, obviously they enjoy it, and then that kind of gets your blood pumping. Like sex and fear are so closely related in the brain, you know, there's like a chemical reaction there. And then I feel like John Carpenter kind of formed this movie with Halloween where he kind of set the stage for a slasher, and they saw how well it worked, and then everybody kind of followed suit. So Friday the 13th, you know, obviously the first film, hopefully I'm not spoiling this for anyone, but Jason's not the killer in the first film.
Right.
But they kind of took a note from Michael Myers, who is this serial killer who keeps coming back, and then they use that with Jason. So I think it's just people see an idea, how it plays out, and then they try and emulate it in some way. I think it's okay to do that as long as you're not like straight up copying. There's some movies where I'm like, okay, they're literally doing like a shot for shot. Like the first movie that I'm doing my analysis on for that column is the Slumber Party Massacre. Have you ever seen that movie?
Yeah, I've seen bits and pieces. It's very if I'm remembering correctly, I think it's very similar to like Black Christmas, right? Because they're all like the original Black Christmas.
Yeah, so well, sort of, because Black Christmas was a serious horror movie, and it was like based in the sorority house. This is just
it's been a long time since I've seen it, so I apologize.
It's pure like camp. It's not scary. They were trying to make a serious scary movie, but it's hilarious. It's like become like a cult classic because it's just so outrageous. So basically, when you watch that movie, if you are a fan of Halloween and you know the movie well enough, there are so many scenes that are shot for shot exactly the same. And Slumber Party Massacre came out 4 years after. So basically they just saw something that worked.
They're like, let's do it.
And they're like, yeah, just do that.
Yeah, and I think that time too, it just like, because it feels like after Halloween came out, and, you know, obviously like neither one of us were born yet, but like, you know, not only do I really enjoy scary movies, but I watch a lot of like documentaries about horror films because I like the way that they're produced and like the story of like how the ideas came together. But it seems like after like Halloween was such a big hit, it was literally like slasher film.
Yeah, the beginning of the 80s, it was basically all slashers, and they all follow the same type deal, like teenagers who are, you know, doing the fuck scare kill method and making money off of it.
Just horny and trying to die. That's
so exactly.
So, you know, I know like we were talking a little bit about how Scream was, you know, very meta for what it was and kind of how to like broke that mold. Like, has there been anything that's come out recently that you feel like kind of breaks that a little bit? Because I try, man. I'm an old man, but like there's that Truth or Dare movie that came out, and I watched that, and I was like, oh man, like this is not good. You know, I don't know if you've seen it.
No, I didn't watch it.
Yeah, I was like, but you know, I want to like, okay. Like maybe, you know, or the other one, and I get so much shit from people, but did you see It Follows?
Yeah.
Did you like it? Because
I thought it was okay.
I did not. I was not a fan.
Everybody loves that movie, and I'm very okay on it.
I made my wife go see it because it was filmed in Michigan. I was like, I gotta go see this.
I mean, it's cool to see a bunch of, places that you recognize, but I thought that it was cool because it was an indie movie, and I always root for indie movies to do well. And like I said, I thought it was fine, and I thought the opening scene was awesome.
Mm-hmm. And the Northville, the old asylum.
The part where she's like running down the street, like in her neighborhood.
Oh yes, yeah. I'm sorry, because they cut. She hooks up with that guy or whatever in the asylum, and I was like, oh, like I know right where that's at. Like I could drive there. I know where it is.
Yeah, so I thought some things were done really well there, but that's just, I don't always agree.
I was iffy about it all the way through, and then they threw like a sheet on it at some point, and it was just like old, like Boris Karloff, like ghost movie, and I was like, fuck this, I'm done. I tapped out.
Yeah, I agree. I liked the cinematography, and I liked I don't know, I thought the idea was fine, but it was there wasn't like a whole lot of plot there.
Yeah.
So I thought it was okay, but everybody loves that movie, so I mean, you don't always agree.
Yeah, I've talked to a lot of people. They're like, it's so, what's wrong with you? It's so good. I'm like, it's really not. It's just like all 80s super loud synth through like the whole thing, and it's really funny because when we went, we sat down in the theater, we had our popcorn. I was really excited about it. I was really hoping it was going to be good. And around the same time, this movie came out called The Last Ride, I believe. Okay. And it was about like a girl who falls in love with like a bull rider in the rodeo. Okay. And like they fall in love, and I think in the movie, like he ends up dying. But spoilers, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to be watching that. Right. So it's okay.
But we sit down, and then like the credits start rolling, and it's that movie. And I was like, so we had to like, I had to go and be like, hey, you guys are showing like the wrong movie. Cause everybody was like, what the fuck is going on? So we sit and we watch it. They change it over and we watch it. And we were walking out there. I looked at my wife and I said, I really wanted to watch. I wish we would have watched that bull ride movie. It had to be better than whatever I just saw.
Yeah. I didn't see it in the theater. I saw it with friends, and we just, we rented it, but, yeah, I didn't, like I said, I liked it fine for what it was, but it's been lauded, and
what's blown your mind lately? Like what's come out where you've just been like, this is, and even if it isn't, maybe it's not something new, maybe it's just like something that's been out that like, you stumbled across, but has there been anything where you're like, this is a game changer. This is, I haven't seen anything done like this.
There was an indie movie. It's called This Is Our Home. I think it's available on Amazon Prime. And it's a very like artsy movie. It's not for everybody. And it's not something that's like, oh man, you gotta keep the lights on for this one. Like it's not gonna like scare the shit out of you or anything. But it's very creepy, and it's basically about this young woman who's in a relationship, and she gets pregnant, and she is so excited about it. And then eventually her boyfriend is kind of like forcing her into getting an abortion. And then she kind of goes through this, PTSD from this abortion that she didn't want. And it's kind of exploring her like journey through that. And it was something where when I was watching on my laptop, and then I just like shut my laptop and just like sat there for a couple minutes after I watch it, and I was like, oh my God. It was just one of those type of movies where you're just like thinking about it for a while. And I like movies like that. I like when there's a lot of different layers and you got to kind of really try and figure it out. I don't like when everything is like given to you and it's just very like, just a slasher or just this or that, whatever. And I actually felt like it was really good that I wrote a review on that movie because one of the lead actress reached out to me and she was like, just so you know, like, I think your interpretation is different from like what we were intending with the movie. And so I ended up doing like an interview with her and
That's
talking all
awesome.
about it. Yeah, and we've kept in touch, and she's awesome. She's actually, I don't know if you've heard of it, but there's this volunteer program in New York City called Invisible Hands Deliver, and she started it. And
Oh, that's really cool.
yeah, she's been on the news and stuff, but she put together this volunteer group of young people who do grocery shopping for the elderly so they don't have to go to the grocery store.
Oh, that's super cool.
Yeah, so anyway, I just kept in touch with her, so I've been following her doing that awesome stuff during this pandemic that we're in. But anyway, it sparks a dialogue for sure. And so I like movies like that. And like, obviously I enjoy a slasher, but this was a little bit different. And I like movies that I've seen where I'm like, I've never seen that before.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I know you're a Garden State fan.
Yes, I do. I love Garden State.
So, and I mean, I will say, I really think that, number one, I think it's awesome that like she read your article and was like, hey, let's talk about this, because that's one of those things that when we were talking about earlier, like horror not always being included as like a serious genre of film. So to have a film like that, and I think I know exactly what movie you're talking about because I have Amazon Prime. I've gone through it, but like that looks really interesting. So now I'm gonna have to watch it. But you know, it's cool to see a movie in the genre that you can watch it and then like have, you know, there's not a lot of horror films where people come out and they're like, well, I think it meant this. You know what I mean? It's usually, it's not a horror film, but when Joker came out, I don't know if you saw that. When I got done watching it, I was the exact same way. I was like, I don't know, like if I hate this dude or like if I feel sorry for him, and like I'd felt dirty because I didn't know how to feel about it. Like I was, you know what I mean? So, and it was like in my head, I told my wife, I'm like, I'm so glad you didn't watch it because did you ever see The Visit? Where
No.
Oh, that was one of those ones that my wife was like, I'll go see this with you.
Yeah.
And I was like, thank you. Like, I really
was that a horror movie? Because
yes.
I know exactly what movie you're talking about, but I got burned because I went to see The Village thinking that was going to be a horror movie, and then it wasn't because it turned into something completely different. I don't know if you ever saw that movie, but it started out one way and then went a completely different way, and I was like, I don't know if The Visit movie is going to be like that or what.
I would say The Visit is a horror film. I mean, I think it definitely has pieces of like what could be considered like a thriller or like a mystery to it. But I mean, there was like jump scares in it. Like it was, I mean, I would definitely class it. And I think M. Night Shyamalan kind of took some pride in being like, this is a horror movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think he
and it, I mean,
you had to do something a little different.
Well, yeah, and I mean, it's all done on like handy cam because
oh, okay.
The kids are going to meet their grandparents, and so they're like documenting the trip.
Okay.
So it's again kind of like found footage, but not found footage. But and I mean, I won't. If you want it, I would watch it, but I won't spoil it unless you know like the whole thing. But
no, I don't.
We left the theater, and my wife was like silent. And I was like, are you okay?
Oh.
And she's like, I'm fine. And then we were driving home and she just burst into tears. She was like, that was, and I'm not going to like say what part of the film it was because that would be spoiling it. But she was like, I need to like never see anything like that ever again. Like,
oh, wow.
And for a long time, she was like, and I was watching, I was like, I didn't think it was that scary, but I think it's kind of the way that it was one of those films where obviously two people watched it and one person was affected by it completely different. So I thought that was really interesting to be like, oh, that's a film that can do that. As opposed to just being like, well, yeah, I mean, some kids had sex and then a couple of them got killed. And at the end there was one, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is there anything that you're excited that's coming out soon? Because I know like Halloween, it's what is that? Halloween Kills
Yeah,
is
that's
supposed to be
what's
coming out
next.
this year.
I'm gonna see the one from 2018 first before I go see that, obviously, and I will see that one. I'll make a better effort to do that, but I am really excited for Antlers. Have you seen the previews for that? Oh, that looks scary. That was like when, my husband doesn't really balk at this kind of stuff. He likes horror movies, okay. He's not like me about it, but he'll watch them with
He's
me.
not watching them like once a week to be like,
yeah, no.
let me write a dissertation on how this.
No. So we saw The Lodge in January. And that one was really good, actually. That one was another one that was a thinker. But there was a preview for Antlers, and I knew it was coming out, but this was like the first like long trailer I'd seen for it. And it is like a creature feature, but there looks like there's some other scary elements to it that are going to make it a little bit different. And I'm excited for that one. That's the first one I've seen in a long time where I'm like, oh, this looks like it's going to be really scary. And there's a lot of like bigger names in it, like Kerry Russell's in it and Jesse Plemons is in it. So that can either be really good or really bad. Because sometimes when you get big names in horror movies, that means that it's like a blockbuster type movie and you're not getting like the kind of movie that I think is like a quality horror movie. So I'm hoping that they signed on because the script is really great and it's going to scare the shit out of people. But now it's like, I had written an article about like the 20 most anticipated horror movies of 2020. And now it's like, I don't even know if those movies are coming out this year. Mm-hmm. And honestly, that's okay with me because it's a lot of remakes.
Yeah.
A lot of remakes and sequels. Not a lot of innovation going on this year at least for the films that are getting a theatrical release. So Antlers for sure. When that comes out, I'm going to see that in the theater.
Now, do you think we're going to get, because I agree with you 110%. It's like they're making another Scream. They're making Scream 5.
I know.
And David Arquette is signed on to play Deputy Dewey again.
Yep.
Like, do you think we're going to get to a spot or like, that's one thing I've really liked about Jordan Peele, like with Get Out and things like that. Like I feel like it's very rare right now that you're seeing like fresh takes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do you think we're going to get, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say he's executive producing. Nia DaCosta is going to direct a remake of Candyman.
Yes, I saw that.
Like a sort of like sequel / remake, I guess, in a gentrified neighborhood in Chicago. We're gonna see how that goes.
Yeah,
because I think that I really love Candyman. I don't think anybody should touch that one, but we're gonna see.
I love the guy who now, what's his Tony?
Tony Todd.
Yes, I guess he's coming back for the remake or the reboot or whatever it is. It's weird because it's not like this is a retelling of it's
a different interpretation basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember on Twitter he had said he had made a statement last year that he was really disappointed that no one had reached out to him about Candyman yet. And he's like, I'm not saying I have to be in it, but I'm just saying like maybe I was like owed a conversation. And he's been in a ton of horror movies. He's like beloved in the horror community. So
there's some Final Destination, I remember.
He's in a ton
of everything.
He's in a ton of stuff. And I know he at least was still doing like a bunch of cons and stuff. So he's like very involved in the horror community. So I know that he had expressed some distaste that no one had reached out to him about it, even to like talk about it. And so I'm wondering if that is kind of what led to him having a part in it. And I'm sure a lot of the fans were like, wait a minute.
You can't do it without him.
Yeah, like he should be a part of it in some way. So, hopefully that'll be good. But
yeah, it's hard with those movies because like obviously, Candyman was what, like early 90s, right?
It
I
was in
want
the
to say
90s sometime,
like
yeah.
90, in between like 90, 94. And then like you have movies like Fright Night, like from the 80s that
Yeah.
I loved. Like
Oh my
I
God,
loved
it's
Fright
so
Night too.
good.
And then they remade it with Colin Farrell
Yeah.
and like it wasn't terrible, but it was like this just isn't.
I liked it, but it
Yeah.
was a completely different movie.
I like that kid who was in it though.
Yeah,
What's his name?
the guy who passed away.
Yeah, Anton Yelkin, and that his
Yeah.
name.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've liked him like he was in Hearts of Atlantis, which is a Stephen King book, but he was in that with oh my God, Anthony Hopkins when he was like a little
Oh,
kid,
okay.
and it's I mean everything that he did, I just could watch him do anything.
Mm-hmm.
He's just that good, but at least I think so. But yeah, I mean it was just like it's hard when it's something that like I mean, take away it being like a cultural thing, but when it's something that's like, this is something that made an impact on me and I love this, you know what I mean? To see somebody try to like do their version of it, it's up in the air, it's just, I don't know. And I'm like, I just hate, like, even with Halloween, like the one thing I will say that I really liked about the 2018, and this isn't, obviously no spoilers or anything like that, but they weren't trying to redo anything. They're like, we're just picking up. It's now 40 years later, whatever.
It's just about her life now, like as a survivor. Yeah.
Right. We don't need another like backstory or, you know what I mean? Anything like that. So even though it was still like that kind of reboot or sequel or whatever, it was still had that like kind of fresh take on it a little bit. So I was happy about that. I'm excited to see what they do. I like what's his name? David Gordon Green and the writer and things like that. So, but yeah, I mean, I know it's getting late at where you are in Michigan. It's about 11. We're a little after 10 o'clock here. So we'll wrap up. I know if you're like me, you've been with your kid all day and things like that. So, but
chasing him around.
Oh yeah. It's fun. I mean, I tell my wife all the time, I'm like, I try not to complain about it because when she's like 14, I'm going to be like, I just want to like,
I know,
run around the house and chase you and hear you laugh. And you're like,
yes,
get out of my face. I hate you.
I know. Well, my son's been saying, leave me alone. And it's like, I just laugh every time.
Billy says, go away.
Yeah, so, he used to say that, and now it's leave me alone. So, yeah, he got that coming for you.
Well, my wife was not very happy because I taught her, I'd be like, what's a duck say? And she'd say quack. And what's a horse say? She says, neigh. As you know, I said, what's mommy say? She goes, no. And I said, what's daddy say? She goes, love you. So like, I'm programming myself to be the good guy.
Oh no.
So she's like, that's just mean. I'm like, well, So, but I wanted to say thank you. And when the next project is done, I would absolutely love to have you come back and talk about, or if you ever want to just come back and talk about movies. We've had a couple people on where that's like literally all we've done because I love talking about movies, and I'm just so happy that you did it. If people want to check out your work, read your articles, where is the best place for them to do that? How can they like follow you, find your stuff?
If you go to writerjessicagomez.com, I have most of my work on there. I keep up with it pretty regularly. If you're just specifically into the horror stuff, you can go to allhorror.com, and basically it's like the IMDb of horror. There's I think 8,000 horror movies on there that you can search through, and you can like make your own list of things you want to watch and stuff like that. And then, as you said, The Realist Bride book is on Amazon. If you want to follow me,
buy it. Everyone, if you're already been married and you think you're going to have a second marriage at some point, buy it.
I mean, my guy friend bought it and he read it just to be supportive. So that was cool. But yeah, so if you want to follow me on Instagram, it's writer Jessica Gomez is my handle. I almost exclusively talk about my writing stuff on there, except for when I'm ranting about people not social distancing.
I wish you would do more of that. Cause again, it's like being able to watch my own inner monologue.
Yeah, I'll say the things you want to say.
Please do. Well, like I said, I really, really appreciate you being here. We'll put all the links in the show notes. I just, I know it's late. I know we both got kids and we're pulling late hours. So I just really, really appreciate it. We're going to end it here, but will you stick around for me for just a second?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Awesome. Thank you guys for checking it out. Episode 15, Jessica Gomez, buy the book, check out the website. Thank you guys for tuning in. All righty.
Thank you.